Hello and welcome back to another episode of Relish the Journey. As always, you're hanging out with me, your host, Miles Biggs, and my guest today is Tony Loyd. Tony had a really impressive career in the Fortune 500 corporate America and then retired early because he was smart and saved his money. And now he's got a bunch of different entrepreneurial ventures, a few podcasts. He helps out where he can and feels like he can make an impact. And he's even got an offer for all of you Relish the Journey listeners to get a free copy of his book. He was generous enough to throw that in at the end. So be sure to listen to the end to hear how you can get a copy of Tony's books for free. And this is a really fun conversation. I could have talked to Tony for like 3 hours. We have so much in common, but I kept it nice and succinct here. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. Tony, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate being on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm honored to be here.
So let's dive into just you as a person before we get into what you as a person is doing right now, because I know you're up to a lot. You got a very interesting background. I remember when we had our quick discovery call just to see if we'd be a fit for working together in this way. Have a lot of experience in corporate America. I've done a lot in startups, and it's just interesting. And I know you have done even more since we talked last. So why don't you bring all the listeners up to speed with a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So the way that I think about myself is I facilitate the growth of other people, right? That's what I do. And it shows up in a lot of different ways. So, wrote a book. I was a corporate executive. I run leadership development workshops. I have a couple of podcasts. So it shows up in a lot of different ways, but it's really in the end, it's really about facilitating the growth of others. That's what I do. So I had a long, good Fortune 500 career. I ended up as a vice president, and I was able to retire from that at age 55. When I left corporate America, I started my own stuff. I did some consulting work, and today I write books. I have podcasts. I have a blog. So same kind of stuff that you're doing. Coaching, consulting, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think it's funny you use the phrase that you ended up as a vice president in a Fortune 500, because I doubt it happens like that. You don't just wake up one day and end up as a VP. So what was your journey to that role like? I'm sure it's different for everyone, but I've never worked in a true Fortune 500 corporate environment. I've worked for companies, but not one that large. So what was the ladder like that you had to climb?
Yeah, honestly, Miles, I had this, I didn't start off obviously at the top of the ladder. I mean, I've done everything literally from drive a truck to clean toilets. I mean, I was a janitor before I was anything else. So, put myself through college, came out, had a very technical degree, but I worked in an area called health physics, which is a fancy way of saying measuring radiation and contamination and setting environmental protection measures. So it was kind of an engineering kind of career. I did that as a consultant. I worked with the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, commercial nuclear power, and eventually I moved into training people how to do technical content. So I got my chops in learning and development through teaching technical material. But eventually, I continued to work on degrees, and I became more known in how to train people how to train, and then how to train leaders in how to change behavior. Because in the end, training was really not about training. Training was about changing behavior. So I was helping companies to make the journey from seeing their training departments as a training department to seeing them as a human performance improvement department that has lots of options to them. And I was doing consulting work like that when I was recruited in by John Deere. I was working for them as a consultant, and they recruited me in. So I helped them to launch a corporate university. We grew that to be around the world. It was a revenue neutral operation. So many major corporations, they spend millions of dollars to train their people. Well, we found ways to sell our training material outside of the company to customers, dealers, et cetera, and then to pay for the internal training, which was an interesting business model. SC Johnson spun off a company called Diversity. They recruited me out of John Deere over to them. We sold that company to another company called Sealed Air. And so when we sold the company, I was freed up from that position. I was picked up by Medtronic. I was their director of global leadership and talent development. And then I worked with Buffalo Wild Wings, who's, if you're familiar with the restaurant chain, a billion-dollar company with over 1,000 locations at the time. And I was their vice president of organization and team effectiveness. So, but honestly, Miles, when I say I ended up somewhere, this is the thing. I feel like all throughout my career, people liked me, they were kind to me, and they helped me to move up to the next level. And so, I almost feel like I don't have the right to say, well, look at me and how good I did, and I climbed the corporate ladder. Honestly, it takes a village, right? So it just took a group of people that saw me, recognized me, and helped me up to the next level. And I don't think in any of my career moves along the way, I ever applied for a job. It was just that somebody saw me, they go, oh, you're doing this. I know somebody who needs your talent. Let me help you to put you two together. And so through just networking and through, reputation and doing good work, obviously I had to work hard, I had to do good work, and I had to be lucky. But I climbed the corporate ladder. And so, one of the things too, though, about working in these corporations, the higher up you go in the corporation, the bigger the bonuses are. And so I am a fairly frugal guy. I don't spend a lot of money. So my wife and we saved a lot of money. And so by the time I was 55, I went, yeah, it's enough.
Yeah.
And so I left corporate America, but then I continue to do projects that I really have a passion about. We wrote a book a couple of years ago, and I'm doing these podcasts. And, just today I was working with a nonprofit organization out of California who needed some help, and they just called me up and, we spent a few hours on the phone with them. So, I have a lot of choices. I have a lot of flexibility, and, so that's my career. That's my life.
Yeah, I love that idea of not having to make a formal application, because I'm a believer that every time you show up anywhere, you're applying. People judge you by the work that you do, the way you show up, your attitude, the way you present yourself, how you say hi and greet them, right? How you make them feel. Yeah. All of that's a job application that just follows you around. And so if you do it right, like you did, you must have, you don't have to put it down on a piece of paper, right? It's just, it precedes you.
Yeah, I think people pay for value. And so one person along the way, as I was applying for a job, so they asked me to apply for the job, and I was going through the interview process, and he asked me about, so what do you do? And so I had kind of built this little table in my head that said, well, your job description says this, and I have that experience, and your job description says this, and I have that experience. And he said, wait a minute, I didn't ask you what my job description said. I asked you what you can do, right? And so that's a different question. And so I talked a little bit about, well, if I were working with your company, here's the kind of things that I think could create a lot of value for your company, and it could make a lot of money for you, and that. And so at the end of the conversation, he said, look, when you come to work for us, and it's not a matter of if, when you come to work for us, don't ever be limited by your job description. He said, if you can create value like that, just bring it on. And so I think that really is the key. If you are an independent consultant and you're trying to sell something, you have to sell something that has value to your client. If you are if you create a product, that product has to have value to the people who buy it. So it's always really about creating value, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's definitely a theme I hear talking to people like you on this podcast, right? The people that I find are the most successful, it pivots at some point from, like you said, talking about yourself. Like, you don't say, oh, I did this. And it becomes all about somebody else, serving others, providing value to others.
Yep.
And when you do that and do that authentically, it always ends up finding its way back to you. That's just how the universe works. So
Yep.
For sure. So how are you building value for people now? I mean, you're talking about books and podcasts and coaching and consulting. You didn't want to retire and just sit on a beach, I guess, huh? You still like to be busy.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I have two different podcasts. So, last year I had to back up a little bit and say, I'm building a business, but I took all my sort of unhealthy work habits from my career and I brought them into my personal entrepreneur journey, right? And that included those, late nights, burning the candle on both ends, all that kind of stuff. And, you and I had a pre-conversation. We could kind of go into the details in as much as you want to. But I came at the end of 2018, I came to the end of myself. I just was like, I'm burnt out, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm tired, I am all the negative emotions, sort of balled up into one. And so I made a decision in 2019 to really focus on self-care. And it was a hard decision for me because I know that you understand this, Miles, because you have a business, you're growing your business, you're doing your coaching work, you're doing your stuff. And it almost feels like if you stop pushing the rock uphill, it's going to roll back down on you, right? And so I really had this big fear that if I didn't just keep pushing and pushing and pushing on growing my business, growing my client list, growing my number of customers, growing the frequency of visits, et cetera, that I was going to end up with nothing from all the effort that I was putting in. So I still, though, had to come to this point where I said, you know what, you can't pour from an empty vessel. And so in 2019, I went on this really deep and meaningful journey to thriving. And so what I mean by that is I was taking care of things like, my physical health, my emotional health, my intellectual well-being, my spiritual health. And then I was taking care of things like connecting. So relationships, I was working on my social connections, my my marriage, my role as a parent, as a grandparent now, and then contributing. So my, making some money, my vocation, my financial well-being, and then also my avocation, so hobbies and causes, so giving some time, talent, and treasure to these different causes. So I really had to stop for a while and focus internally. And here's the interesting thing. By doing that, not only did my well-being, my health improve, but also my relationships improved and my business grew. And that was the surprising part for me. It was kind of like, well, I'm going to have to sacrifice a year of really, business growth. And I'm going to have to, take a big hit this year because here's what I found. And I'm sure you found the same thing in your business, Miles. The more you have within yourself to give other people, the more value you can create for them. And so that was really a big breakthrough for me last year. And so, that's one of the things that I'm able to work with people on now is, first of all, how do you measure, thriving in life? How do you measure connecting with others? How do you measure contributing to the world? And then what's the gap between where you are and where you want to be? And then how do you make a plan to move the needle from where you are to where you want to be? And I found that a lot of people understood the importance of connections, right? So networking or connecting with other people in order to help grow the business. They understood the concept of contributing, of working, doing a greater contribution. But the thriving part, the physical well-being, the emotional well-being, the intellectual and the spiritual, it's kind of like those went on the back burner in order to focus on all those other things. But through my experience and now the way that I help people to do a self-assessment and then to coach them and then to help them to move the needle, I have found that that's the secret, that you can't pour from an empty vessel. You have to start with thriving, then connecting, then contributing.
Yeah, I love that. And that makes so much sense. And I forget the exact way you phrased it, but to me, what rang in my head, it was reminding me of a conversation I had with somebody recently about impact. And I really feel like when you can make a big impact, that's when you're the most impacted, right? So
Yeah.
that's just what you're making me think of. And I have that conversation with people all the time when it's not even selling something. People don't want to be sold. When you talk about your business growing. So what I think what probably happened was people, when they interacted with you, they could feel that you were thriving, right? And then they're like, what does this guy have? I want a piece of it, right? And then you end up getting more business because of it. I see that sometimes in my business. I'm on the different networking apps and I'm looking to work with people on a one-on-one coaching basis, right? And some days I'm firing on all cylinders. I'm on it. And they're just like, yes, sign me up. How much? Take it all, right? The perfect sales call. Yeah. And then sometimes I'm just dragging. I'm not thriving and it doesn't go well. It feels like I lose the power of the conversation, like all those things. You're not thriving. So I never thought of it that way. But it's really ringing true to me. It's a question you can check yourself because so much of it comes from that self-awareness that you have gotten through this year of self-care, right? That just even asking yourself, am I thriving right now? Because we could say that we're busy or we're successful in one area, but if we're thriving, that means we're doing well in all of them, is what I heard you say.
Yeah. Yeah. Just an example of that, one of the things, and I know that you're a dad. And so sometimes when you're a young dad and you have kids, the candle gets burned on both ends, whether you want it to or not. Right.
Absolutely.
But one of the things I did last year, and this was just a minor adjustment really in a way, I had this bad habit of I would wake up with my brain on fire, right? And I would just leap out of bed. And sometimes it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes it's 4 o'clock in the morning, right? I would just, ideas would come to me and I would just get up and go work. So one of the things I had to work on last year was sleeping. That I didn't really recognize that I was not getting enough sleep. But once I got myself a Garmin watch that I could wear to bed and that I can, it measures my sleep patterns and whether I'm having deep sleep or REM sleep or whatever. But just making that one adjustment to say I'm committing to 7+ hours of sleep and I'm shooting for 8, but I won't beat myself up if I get at least 7. And to get enough sleep. That is just one more way that your battery gets recharged, your brain becomes clear. I mean, literally what happens at night when you are asleep, the neurons start to fire in syncopation. They begin to fire together. And what they're doing is they are moving the fluids through your brain in order to clean the plaque and get all the old gunk out of there and to clean things up. And if you break that sleep cycle, if you don't go into that deep sleep, if you don't allow your brain to do that, then you just wake up the next day with still all the toxins in your brain and all the stuff that was there the day before. So, that's one tiny example. You could name hundreds of things that you can do for yourself like that. That can make a huge difference in your ability to be present with a customer or with a family member or with one of your children or whomever, but just the ability to be present and to have reserves to draw from.
Yeah, you're so right. And I learned that too. I mean, it seems like our timing, we're kind of decades apart, right? And how old we are, but had a similar realization around 2018, 2019, where we said enough was enough and we started to do more work on ourselves. For me, it's right around the same time. And one of the big things that helped me, because I totally agree about sleep, and it's something that I try to do a lot better at. I used to stay up right after I recorded conversations like this, because right now we're talking and it's 9:15 at night where I'm at. And I'd stay up to midnight, do all this editing, do all this stuff right while it's fresh. But then I'm going to bed and I'm waking up. I'm not really falling asleep till 1. I'm waking up at 5. It's just not good. And I used to, like you said, brain on fire, right? My brain would be on fire. The way I would get my brain to shut up and I could just quote unquote relax would be drinking after the workday, right? Come home, have a couple of beers, a couple of glasses of wine, and then go to bed. But it wasn't really going to bed, for people listening, right? Passing out is not sleeping. You don't get those regenerative properties like you're talking about, right? And so that's been for me the biggest key is realizing how much time I was wasting drinking. How it affected my sleep. And now it's been about a year since I've really drank and I sleep more, or sometimes I sleep less, but it's actual sleep, right? And I feel amazing and I get so much more done. I'm so much more productive. I'm just on it all the time. You don't have that groggy feeling. So I could
Well,
talk for that for a while.
congratulations.
All the books I've read and stuff, when I got curious about it, I just went down that rabbit hole hard on like all the neuro stuff. It's crazy. And then meditation, what that can do with actually producing gray matter in your brain. And there's so much when you get into that self-care rabbit hole that you can really learn and make yourself better.
Yeah, I really like the app Headspace. It's one that I use, and you can do anything from a 5-minute to an hour-long meditation using this app, and I just love it. So you're right. I think that there's so many little things that you can do, because once you're plugged in and once you're refreshed, you realize just how much you weren't fresh before and how much more you could have done.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's, to me, that was a real like stark comparison. And so then it makes you even hooked even more, which I think is good, right? Like you don't want to go back to what it was, because now you've seen how great it can be, and then you want to keep making it better and better.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite part about working in retirement, right? You worked for Fortune 500. Now you've got all these side projects with books and coaching, consulting, and podcasts.
Yeah.
Why do you do all those things, and what's your favorite part about it right now?
Yeah, I think part of it is just making a contribution to the world, right? That, so don't get me wrong. I mean, a few years ago, my wife and I decided to take a 60-day sabbatical, and we went to, Portugal and Spain, and we popped up to London for a while, and then finished out in France. And so, we definitely do unplug completely from time to time and just turn everything off and just go do it, right? But I couldn't do that full time, not because it's not enjoyable. It's not because I don't enjoy my wife's company. It's just that I want to make a contribution, right? So here's my philosophy. I think that we are here on earth to connect, first of all. And so that's connecting with one another, that's connecting with a higher power, that's connecting with nature, that we were built to connect. I mean, when our ancestors were growing up on the plains, and the ones that wandered off by themselves, they got eaten, and the ones that stayed with the pack, they didn't, right? Because we were built to be social.
Right.
And so I think we're here to connect, and we're here to make a contribution. And what your contribution and my contribution are, they could be completely different. And my contribution in this season of my life is completely different than it was within my own life in a different season, right? So to make a contribution. But in order to connect and in order to contribute, we first have to practice self-care. And that is what I call thriving. So that's it to me: thrive, then connect, then contribute. And so that's why I do all these projects. I want to continue to contribute. I want to continue to make an impact. And that was a good word that you used earlier. A lot of the people I work with, they are purpose-driven business leaders. So we're talking about social entrepreneurs, people who use business models to do social good. And so that, to me, it fills my cup. But it's not enough by itself. I also have to fill my own cup, right? I have to plug the holes in the bucket before I can, to mix my metaphors here. I have to plug the holes in the bucket before I can put more in. So,
right.
That's why I do this stuff. I want to make a difference. And, when I was young, I had a near drowning experience. I was about 15 years old. I had a near drowning experience. And I tell you, it helped me immensely, because it helped me to understand just what it means to have a very short life. And at the end of every podcast episode, I always say, use this one short, amazing life and go make an impact. And that kind of, to me, is the driving thing that's in my brain, that I keep saying that, not just to other people, but I'm saying it to myself, that this is a short life. And as we're seeing right now in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic, it's a very short life for a lot of people. So, I think that's why I do it. I just, while I'm here on this earth, I want to make the biggest ding in the corner of the universe that I can.
Love that. So in all your hobbies, your extracurriculars and your business, right? What's the biggest excuse you hear other people making for why they're not doing what you're doing? So I'm assuming people bring that to you, right? Because they'll come to me and say, "Oh, I wish I could do X, Y, and Z like you," but insert excuse. Yeah. What's the one you hear all the time?
I think it's almost always I don't have time, right? And I don't have time means this isn't a priority. I mean, really, let's just be honest. But I also think that people have this idea in their heads that they have to have a completely baked everything before they give themselves permission to start. And to me, I think starting is where the magic is. I mentioned that I wrote a book a couple of years ago, and I interviewed 150 people for the book. I boiled everything that they said to me down to the top 10 lessons that I learned from them. And then the 10th chapter is really kind of the summary of all that. But honestly, if I took that entire book, I could throw the whole thing away and I could just write down this message on a little sticky note. And this is the entire book. And it is this. It is miracles find you while you're in motion. And what I mean by that is, if you're sitting on your sofa and you're sitting on your hands and you're sitting still, it's like you're surrounded by all these little coincidences, these little moments of synchronicity or serendipity or chances or, these chance meetings or things. But it's like they're surrounding you, but they can't see you because you're not moving. But it's the second that you stand up from that sofa and you start moving forward and you start getting into motion, that's when you run into those little choice or little chance things that happen that surprise you sometimes. You happen to meet that one person, or you happen to, like you're driving home, you're going, boy, there's a happy hour over here. I should go there. I don't really feel like it. Well, I'll go there anyway. And you end up meeting your next customer there, right? So these things happen not because you had a perfect plan, but because you were in motion. And I think that to me is the number one thing that I see where people fail. They think they have to have the perfect plan. They have to have it all figured out. What they assume is that it has to come from them. And in the end, the only good idea in business ever was something that came from your customer. Your customer has a need and you're responding to that customer need.
And I'm going to have to play that whole section back to myself like 5 times. There were so many good little nuggets of wisdom in there. That was great. I really do love that, miracles find you in your emotion, because you're right. It reminds me of, playing with my son. He's a little over 2. And it's a whole idea that if he thinks he closes his eyes and stops moving, I can't see him, right? We play hide and seek and he stands in the middle of the room and thinks he's hiding, but he's standing still. So it is that, right? When you are sitting still, quite literally, you are invisible to the opportunities that may be all around you. You're just too busy, watching TV. So
yeah.
So with everything that you have learned and seen and been a part of in your career, how would you summarize your whole professional journey in 3 words? And I'm gonna say you can't use your 3 because we've gone through those 3 of the podcast like 3 times already. So
yeah,
I'll make you think outside the box and pick a new 3 other than the ones you've been going over.
Can I have 4 words? Can "the" be one of those words in there? Let's see. So I was really thinking, facilitate the growth of others. That's really, I think, if I can't say thrive, connect, contribute, right? That's kind of been my thing for the last year. But really, in the end, I'm about facilitating the growth of others. And, and sometimes that's, a growth in relationships. Sometimes that's a growth in their careers, but often is that personal growth that they go through. And often people will come to me and they'll say, hey, I'm having trouble with this business thing. I'm having trouble with this thing over here. But in the end, it comes back to that thing about thriving. And so, I think that to me is the big sum, the big bow on it all, is facilitating the growth of others.
Yeah, and I like how you said even personal growth, right? So it's like facilitating personal growth, if I had to force that into 3. Because it goes back to your idea of the self-care and making sure you're fulfilled and full so that you can give to others, be it in your personal life or professional. Because I think a lot of people, they talk about work-life balance as if they're separate things. But really, you're one you, right? No matter where you're at. So you have to be growing personally in order to grow professionally.
Perfect, yes.
Love it. So what is call it just elevator pitch, right? If you're the elevators are closing, you got to get one last word in before we wrap up today. What's the final nugget, piece of advice you want to leave people with to remember Tony Loyd by?
I have to repeat it. So we're here on earth to connect with others and to make a contribution to the world. But before you can connect and contribute, you have to practice self-care. So it's thrive, then connect, then contribute.
Love it. So where can people find you if they want more of what you have to say?
Well, the only weird thing about me is that my last name, well, not the only thing, but the only weird thing about trying to find me is that my last name is spelled with one L. So it's Tony Loyd. And so people can go to tonyloyd.com, TonyLoyd.com. And they can find me there. And then social media, I'm pretty much Tony Loyd everywhere else. And then, if listeners of Relish the Journey want a copy of my book, they can feel free to just send me an email, Tony@TonyLoyd.com, and mention Relish the Journey, and I'll send them a free copy.
Oh, cool. I appreciate you doing that for them. I'll make sure we talk about that when we share the episode too, so people know to take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the book is called Crazy Good Advice, 10 Lessons Learned from 150 Leading Social Entrepreneurs, and it's some good stuff.
Yeah, awesome. So the email again was what? It was Tony@TonyLoyd.com?
Right, and just spell Loyd with one L, TONY@TONYLOYD.com.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time for this interview, and I look forward to sending people your way and having you send books their way. Nice trade.
Yeah. Hey, Miles, listen, thanks so much for having me, man. It's an honor to be on with you.
All right, that'll do it for another episode of Relish the Journey. As always, thank you all so much for listening. I would thank you one more time if you could go ahead and leave me a review of this podcast wherever you're listening. Subscribe as well so we can help spread the word about Relish the Journey and introduce more people to awesome guests like Mr. Tony Loyd, who I'm very grateful gave his time to share with us his story today. And how awesome is that book offer, guys? Free book. So go ahead and email Tony and get yourself a copy and start your own personal growth journey. I can guarantee you will not regret it. So until next time, everyone, I hope you all relish your own journeys, and I will talk to you next time. Cheers.